Okay, let's start.
Nahukay sa Butuan City sa Agusan del Norte ang ngayon na Nahukay sa Butuan City sa Agusan del Norte ang ngayon na pinakamalaking balangay o sinaunang bangka na ginamit ng ating mga ninuno sa pagsusuri ng mga eksperto. Posibleng ang balangay na ito ay ginamit at ginawa noong bago pa man dumating sa Pilipinas si Ferdinand Magellan. Nakatutok si Dano Tingkungko.
Sa pag-uukay ng ika-4 na nadiskubreng balangay o sinaunang bangka ng ating mga ninuno sa Butuan City, Agusan del Norte, aksidenteng natuklasan ang pinakamalaking balangay sa kasaysayan ng excavation sa bansa. Ang pangsyam na balangay binansagan ngayon ng National Museum na Mothership Balangay o Butuan Boat No. 9 o Masahong Butuan. Nasa 12 metro pa lang daw ang haba ng nahuhukay ng mga eksperto pero tinatayang nasa 25 ang kabuuang haba nito. Sa inisyal na carbon dating sa balangay, posibleng sa pagitan ng taong 1215 at 1250 ginawa ang balangay. Panahon bago pa man dumating si Ferdinand Magellan sa bansa noong 1521.
It only shows that our ability to construct or to build big boats is not something new. It's been going on since the 12th century or even earlier. Even before the Chinese came to the Philippines, the Filipinos went to China. I mean, through the Butuanos.
Nang bisitahin ng GMA News ang excavation site sa Barangay Libertad sa Butuan kahapon, lubog sa tubig ang hukay kung saan nakabaon ang mothership balangay dahil sa pag-ulan. Ayon sa officer in charge ng Butuan Museum, nasa 6 na talampakan na ang lalim ng nahukay ng team. Ipinatigil na muna ang operasyon dahil sa kakulangan ng pondo pero inaasahang babalik ang mga archaeologists sa susunod na buwan.
Ito kasi yung parang kasagutan sa missing link ng kultura natin, kung ano ba talaga yung uri ng pamumuhay meron ang mga ninuno natin.
Ayon naman sa National Museum, humigit kumulang 1 taon pa bago tuluyang maialis sa hukay ang mothership balangay.
Present status ng bangka, it's underwater also. We just let the water seep in and then leave it at that because it's more protective than if we have to dry it. Kasi ang mangyayari, pag drinay mo yan, magpupulbos yung kahoy. Kasi organic yun. So if you expose that to a different environment without conservation, proper conservation, then it becomes useless and then it will disintegrate. Eventually, wala na tayong aabutan.
Pero ang misteryo ng pinakamalaking balangay, nagbabadyang baguhin ang kinagis ng kasaysayan ng mga Pilipino bago tayo sinakop ng mga Kastila. Dano Tingkong, Nakatutok, 24 Oras.
Good evening, everyone. So after watching the video, I assume that a lot of you have already got an idea on the topic that we are about to discuss, and that is the ingenious Filipino boat, or famously known as the Balangay. So a quick overview about this certain boat. It was noted from the video itself that the Balangay somewhat explains the missing link in uncovering the culture of the Filipinos in the past. Further, this is the first wooden watercraft excavated in Southeast Asia. The word Balangay is derived from Balanghay, meaning barangay, smallest political unit in our country. So this was perhaps in difference to the unique brand of unity evident among the builders of these boats. And another thing that we should consider when discussing Balangay is that these boats were crucial in the settlement of Austronesian people in the Philippine archipelago. It was also used for cargo and trading, in which Butuan Agusan del Norte was the central trading port during those times. So basically, there are 9 existing balangays, 3 of which have been systematically excavated by National Museum archaeologists, with others still waterlogged in specific sites in Butuan City. So in this particular report, we will delve further on sites located at Butuan. With this in mind, the first discovered boat, now preserved and displayed in a site museum in Libertad, Butuan City, had a carbon date of 320, while the second boat, which was being transferred to the Maritime Hall of the National Museum at Manila, was dated at 1250. The third boat remains in a conservation vat at the Butuan Regional Museum, undergoing preservative measures. As mentioned earlier, Butuan served as a trading hub in the past.
Moving on, how to build the balangay. The first step is to select and cut a tree. The Pandays, who are the master shipwrights, prefer dalawaan because it is a strong hardwood growing large enough for a canoe measuring 120 centimeters to be hewn from a single trunk. So, a single tree may produce 2 lengths of curving planks already. Here, the kuturo was used as a guide. Step 2 is to carve the log according to the curve of the hull, while leaving out protrusions on the inside part of the planks, which will serve as the tambukos or lugs, kung saan i-attach mamaya yung ribs or agara. Just take a look at the picture sa lower left, yung mga square sa loob yung tambukos. Then, para ma-check yung tining process ng hull, the Panday usually bore holes through the sides gamit ang lakob. These holes will then be plugged later like the pic sa upper left. Did you know that a good Panday could make a hull measuring 9 to 10 meters long and 0.5 to 1 meter wide in just 8 to 10 days? A boat carved out of a single piece of wood is called a baroto or banka for the Tagalogs. The balangays then are those measuring more than 10 meters in length that are constructed on square keels as edge-peg plank-built boats. According to some sources, itong banka ay yung keel or pinaka-center plank na mismo ng balangay. Keel ay yung pinaka-bottom na part ng boat kung makikita dun sa picture. As for the third step, the planks are put together using edge dowels. Ito yung nagsaserve na nail or pako pero they are made of wood as well, measuring 19 centimeters long. Tignan nyo na lang yung picture as reference. Dowels yung mga small protrusions dun sa balangay. Tapos, when drying, the planks are meticulously elevated to evade termite infestation. After drying, disassemble the planks one by one, tapos i-replace yung mga broken dowels. After inspect and replace yung mga broken dowels and planks na rin, i-assemble ulit yung mga planks. Once the planks were fitted together, the space between the planks were run through with a lakob to even out the space between the planks. These spaces are then stuffed with pugahan or idyok palm fibers. This process is called sugi. Next step ay yung os-os. Here, the rattan cords are tied through the holes bored into the lugs or tambukos as you can see in the picture. This is to prevent the planks from sliding up and down by pulling against them with cords. Last is the pamota, which is the drilling of holes through the pegs on each plank by using a nail punch with a square cross-section. These nails are square pins measuring 4 meters in length. They are usually made from ipil as it is a strong wood that produces resin in salt water. This resin is so sticky na kahit na mag-break off yung pegs, hindi pa rin maglulusen yung mga pins. With that, the shell is already finished. And to complete the hull, maglagay na lang ng mga ribs and seats. Yung seats ay yung smothered branches of wood that were punched with 1 or 2 holes at each end. Through this, ibabind na lang yung mga seats across the boat. However, there's a problem. If the balangays carry cargoes, then it must have been sail-powered rather than propelled by paddlers, which is problematic sa stability ng boat. Yung unang solution na pinopose nila dito ay yung pagdagdag ng ballast, pero this proved to be detrimental sa sailing qualities ng hull. Moreover, the lowering of the center of gravity to the necessary stabilizing level was impossible. So, yung ibang solution na pinopose nila ay yung pag-add ng outriggers, which proved to be effective because they allowed the stability of the boat to increase without adding greatly to its weight. It would also have had the ability to carry a sail without the threat of capsizing. With that, let's talk about the outrigger supports of the balangay. The outriggers are constituted by batangans and tadiks. The batangans are crossbeams extending at least a meter beyond the gunwale. Gunwale ay yung upper edge of the boat side. Then yung nakafasten naman sa mga batangan by large square pegs or rattan cords ay yung mga tadik, which are parallel to each other. Pero sa isang outrigger, pwedeng isang tadik lang yung gamit. Sa picture, yung shorter crossbeams pero greater in number ay yung batangan, while the longer and fewer ones are the tadik. The other components of the balangay include the sail, the block and tackle, and the bugsay. In lowering and raising the sail, a block and tackle comprise the rigging mechanism. Braces of rattan rope are utilized here. The bugsay, wala pa kaming mahanap na picture ng actual paddle ng balangay pero accounts say that they are 1 meter to 120 centimeters long, with a leaf-shaped blade with a measure of 20 by 40 centimeters.
After learning the process of balangay boat making, let's discover the problems that balangay finders or archaeologists faces today. First and foremost, the sites where balangays are commonly found were all waterlogged. In the 1970s, the balangays that were uncovered are submerged underwater. Basically, the walls of the excavation site also had to be securely reinforced with slabs of lumber to prevent soil from collapsing. The fact that the excavation site was located 6 kilometers south of the seashore and 8 kilometers from the nearest river, a small branch of the large Agusan River, could explain why it was constantly flooded. So the other problem was the presence of path hunters. Illegal excavations were so rampant that most of the time, sites had been ravaged by selfish diggers out to retrieve precious Chinese and Southeast Asian ceramics as well as pieces of gold. Thus, the artifacts recovered were often rendered archaeologically useless since they had already been taken out of context. Moving on, this time, let us understand how the discoveries of balangays can help us picture or comprehend how the Filipinos had lived in the past and how does this contributes to the current reservoir of the Philippine knowledge and history. Firstly, are the data from food remains found in the boat. A variety of animal remains was successfully recovered from this maiden. The majority of the finds were meal discards or food refuse such as shells of both marine water species, bones and vertebrae of sea animals such as sharks, large fishes, and sea turtles, in bones and teeth of terrestrial animals, including chickens, pigs, and deer. Aside from being merely food refuse, some of the materials had also been used as ornaments by the inhabitants of the area. This data gathered from the analysis of the boats and the materials found in their vicinity is very significant to Philippine and Southeast Asian prehistoric research. This is especially important for the study of prehistoric maritime trade and the availability of important natural resources. Second is the trade network across islands. Due to the archipelagic nature of the Philippines, boats must have had a vital role in transportation, commerce, and social contact among population centers during the prehistoric periods. Findings from various sites in the country suggest the existence of a trade network entailing commodity exchange with an established clientele. The trade of material goods in bulk over the large expanses of water enhanced the establishment of coastal communities which were highly centralized and densely populated. So ayun, medyo naging crucial at essential ang naging role ng boat in terms of the trade network talaga sa Pilipinas and the neighboring countries during that time. Moreover, let's also see the role of gold as a trade of commodity. An aspect of prehistoric maritime trade that has not been extensively investigated is the role that gold played as a trade item. That one of the main reasons for the presence of a large proto-historic population center in Butuan was the availability of gold in fairly large quantities is indicated by recent gold finds. The recovery by present-day gold panners in Butuan of both worked and unworked gold may be a clue in the pre-16th century large-scale exploitation of this precious metal in northeastern Mindanao. Other natural resources available at that time were definitely abundant and had their own worth, but the value of gold as a trade item then as now remains unparalleled. So ayun, there's still further investigation to be made in order for this to be fully understood by people or archaeologists at the same time anthropologists today. So last but not the least, the recovery of the balangay serves as a testimony to the long tradition of Filipino ingenuity in boat building and seamanship. Filipino expertise in boat building was employed by the Spanish colonial regime in the form of Caracua fleets that fought the Moros and mercantile galleons that crossed the Pacific. Filipino nautical skills were attested by the Spanish accounts, and the importance of the seafaring Philippine culture was aptly demonstrated by vocabularies contained in early 17th century Spanish dictionaries of Philippine languages. So today, as an enduring tribute to early maritime excellence, the Philippine government has declared all the balangays as natural cultural treasures and the entire area where they were discovered as an invaluable archaeological complex. So basically, balangay is really a wonder for the archaeologists, especially the way that it was made. So I think this is it.
Okay, thank you very much, Group 1. Let's proceed to group number 2.
Good evening. Today, we're going to briefly discuss prehistoric writing, the 15th chapter of Kasaysayan Volume 2, written by Cecilia Salcedo. First, let's start with the act of writing and the literacy of our ancestors prior to Spanish colonization. Writing is the act or art of forming visible letters or characters depicting ideas, words, and symbols to communicate or record. In the Philippines, writing was developed in many parts of the country and its inhabitants were already literate even before the arrival of the Spaniards during the late 16th century. Early Spanish missionaries Pedro Quirino in his 1602 account and Francisco Colin in 1663 have noted and observed that the people from the islands were accustomed to their own method of reading and writing. It was rare for these people to not know and practice that method of reading and writing, including those who have been devoted to Christianity. Filipinos became illiterate after the Spaniards replaced syllabic writing with the Roman alphabet. Due to this inadequacy, Filipinos were deemed uncivilized. But when and where did writing begin? Picture writing or pictography is the act of using pictures to represent ideas suggested by an object and not the illustrated object itself. Human and animal markings were found in caves dating back to Stone Ages, particularly in Asia and Europe. Examples of these include animal species drawn on cave walls that indicate the usual prey of hunters, and drawings of the sun which suggest heat or warmth. More complex forms of picture writing may have originated from the area of Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. It is a broad and fertile valley between the rivers of Tigris and Euphrates, which was said to rightfully claim as the birthplace of civilization. This is where Sumerians built cities 5,000 years ago and invented a system of writing. Sumerian writings in the cuneiform were preserved on baked clay tablets. The system of writing was usually used in trade and legal records and was also used for wisdom literature or short philosophical reflections similar to Bible's proverbs. These are considered to be one of the vital legacies of ancient Mesopotamia. They also served as indicators of the social situations in Sumerian cities, with many passages still relevant today. Furthermore, Sumerian literature featured many epic tales of its rulers and curriculum records of Sumerian schools. The Babylonians and the Assyrians inherited Sumerian literature, and in time, this knowledge was passed on to the Greeks and the Romans, and eventually to the rest of the world.
There are many arguments regarding the roots of early writing in the Philippines. Some scholars question the accuracy of documents where specimens of early writing has been derived. Some criticize how the scripts were written, whether from bottom to top or from left to right, and others are concerned of the exact origin of syllabic writing, whether it was Indic, Tamil, or Sanskrit. In relation to this, Filipino anthropologist Felipe Landahogano believed that despite the political fragmentation early on in the Filipino culture, it was relatively homogeneous when the Spaniards arrived. Many of the basic features of local lifestyle throughout the country were generally shared by the population, which was made possible by the development of writing as a means to communicate. The most literate among early Filipinos were those from riverine and coastal communities. These were the Ilocanos, the Pangasinenses, the Pampangos, and the Tagalogs in Luzon, the Samar Leyte groups, and the Negrenses in Visayas, and
Sir, may I ask po if I should repeat the video? Kasi naglalag daw po. Sir?
Yes, yes. So you will repeat the video?
Yes po, for a while.
Sige, sige.
Ayusin ko lang.
Okay.
Good evening. Today, we're going to briefly discuss prehistoric writing, the 15th chapter of Kasaysayan Volume 2, written by Cecilia Salcedo. First, let's start with the act of writing and the literacy of our ancestors prior to Spanish colonization. Writing is the act or art of forming visible letters or characters depicting ideas, words, and symbols to communicate or record. In the Philippines, writing was developed in many parts of the country and its inhabitants were already literate even before the arrival of the Spaniards during the late 16th century. Early Spanish missionaries Pedro Quirino in his 1602 account and Francisco Colin in 1663 have noted and observed that the people from the islands were accustomed to their own method of reading and writing. It was rare for these people to not know and practice that method of reading and writing, including those who have been devoted to Christianity. Filipinos became illiterate after the Spaniards replaced syllabic writing with the Roman alphabet. Due to this inadequacy, Filipinos were deemed uncivilized. But when and where did writing begin? Picture writing or pictography is the act of using pictures to represent ideas suggested by an object and not the illustrated object itself. Human and animal markings were found in caves dating back to Stone Ages, particularly in Asia and Europe. Examples of these include animal species drawn on cave walls that indicate the usual prey of hunters, and drawings of the sun which suggest heat or warmth. More complex forms of picture writing may have originated from the area of Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. It is a broad and fertile valley between the rivers of Tigris and Euphrates, which was said to rightfully claim as the birthplace of civilization. This is where Sumerians built cities 5,000 years ago and invented a system of writing. Sumerian writings in the cuneiform were preserved on baked clay tablets. The system of writing was usually used in trade and legal records and was also used for wisdom literature or short philosophical reflections similar to Bible's proverbs. These are considered to be one of the vital legacies of ancient Mesopotamia. They also served as indicators of the social situations in Sumerian cities, with many passages still relevant today. Furthermore, Sumerian literature featured many epic tales of its rulers and curriculum records of Sumerian schools. The Babylonians and the Assyrians inherited Sumerian literature, and in time, this knowledge was passed on to the Greeks and the Romans, and eventually to the rest of the world.
There are many arguments regarding the roots of early writing in the Philippines. Some scholars question the accuracy of documents where specimens of early writing has been derived. Some criticize how the scripts were written, whether from bottom to top or from left to right, and others are concerned of the exact origin of syllabic writing, whether it was Indic, Tamil, or Sanskrit. In relation to this, Filipino anthropologist Felipe Landahocano believed that despite the political fragmentation early on in the Filipino culture, it was relatively homogeneous when the Spaniards arrived. Many of the basic features of local lifestyle throughout the country were generally shared by the population, which was made possible by the development of writing as a means to communicate. The most literate among early Filipinos were those from riverine and coastal communities. These were the Ilocanos, the Pangasinenses, the Pampangos, and the Tagalogs in Luzon, the Samar Leyte groups, and the Negrenses in Visayas, and the Butuanons in Mindanao. Other communities in Mindanao and Sulu have high probabilities of having their own system of writing, most likely superseded by Arabic script influenced among Islamized groups and Romanized alphabets from the Christian population. Based on the aforementioned communities' geographical orientation, it was suggested that writing was initially used to record transactions among themselves and other foreign traders equally literate in syllabic writing. Trading centers were considered important, and writing may have been utilized to record transactions, and subsequently, the scripts were then used to record folktales, poetry, songs, and other forms of literature. There are two contemporary groups who have retained the traditional script writing. These are the Tagbanwa in Palawan and the Bangyan in Mindoro. Their writing system has endured generations despite an informal kind of learning through simply watching others etch out scripts on bamboos. But how about for records of other ancient writing in the Philippines? Comparative analysis of the few available documents on ancient writing would indicate at least 16 types of scripts or syllabary writing identified from different groups as reported by Robert Fox. In spite of these variations, It was said that they all originated from the same cultural tradition. There were 3 vowel syllable signs, and there were 14 consonants. The 3 examples of surviving artifacts bearing ancient scripts are the Calatagan earthenware pot, the Butuan silver paleograph, and the Laguna copper plate. Aside from these 3, other artifacts were also found. However, they were made of perishable materials like bamboo nodes, tree barks, and leaves.
The Calatagan pot, excavated in an archaeological site in Calatagan, Batangas, is considered to have the best preserved specimen of prehistoric writing in Luzon. Inscribed with 39 symbols of ancient Philippine scripts around the neck, Juan R. Francisco, an Indologist, assumed that from a top view, the line begins from at the point farthest from the rim. Scholars from different fields of studies provided various transliterations and interpretations of the inscriptions, such as a dedicatory piece, a long message written in symbolic language to accommodate the text in a constricted space, and a prayer offering. Upon further research, Dr. Ramon Guillermo, in his 2011 study, proposed that the inscription is an ancient spell or charm written in a Central Philippine language with Japanese script influence.
Butuan City in Agusan Province is known as one of the havens for treasure hunting. Treasure hunters would scrounge for antique treasures where a strip of metal with inscription had been found among the pits looted by pot hunters. The Butuan silver paleograph, measuring 17.8 centimeters long and 1.3 centimeters wide, presents 22 units of writing on one side of the strip, not similar to the writing of the Calatagan pot, as well as syllabaries from the Spanish period, nor of the Mangyans and Tagbanwas. It is impossible to completely decipher the inscriptions from the strip unless more characters were discovered and analyzed. In addition, an academic paper written by Augusto de Viana states that the strip had a companion piece with a similar writing. However, the owner refused to hand it over to archaeologists, believing that it held the key to the treasure hoard.
Finally, the Laguna copper plate acquired by Alfredo Evangelista in 1990 is the most significant ancient script in the Philippines. It provided a reassessment of the country's history pre-Spanish era in the 10th century AD and showed its relationship with the rest of Southeast Asia. It contains a 10-line inscription of small characters impressed on one side of a thin copper plate with Mangyan culture specialist Antun Postma, together with paleographer Johann de Casperis, studying and transliterating the script. The language used on the plate was of Sanskrit origin with words from Old Javanese. The main language used was Old Malay, similar to the Old Tagalog language. Bearing the Saka date of 900, the Laguna copper plate tells an important person with partially unpaid debt is threatened with enslavement. Debate ensued between the leaders of different settlements whether the debtor should be acquitted or enslaved together with his family and descendants. The 10th line of the script, however, ends mid-sentence, deeming it inconclusive.
Casparis argued that the language on the copper plate was problematic, given that there were hard-to-explain words such as the introduction done in Sanskrit, and titles of important persons unlikely of Old Javanese descriptions, which might belong to another Malayan language of Old Tamil origin. He was confused over the use of the honorific address Pamgat, which was never encountered in written documents outside the Javanese context. Postma said, however, that the word is common in the history of the Tagalog language. Postma argued that in 16th century Tagalog dictionaries, the term pamagat is mentioned as a title or special name for persons in its abbreviated forms. Magat and gat were still commonly used during the Spanish occupation. In current times, Filipino surnames like Gat Maitan, Gat Dula, Gatchalian, and Gat Bonton are said to be vestiges of titles for chiefs of territories during the pre-Spanish Philippines.
The repeatedly mentioned title Pamgat in the copper plate therefore may be a common reference to chiefs or people of importance during the 10th century Philippines. Pamagat, which is still used in present-day Tagalog, evolved into an impersonal level which currently means the title of a book, a chapter of a heading, or a printed announcement. While still seeking scientific documentation, it can be said that Filipino literacy was fairly developed even before the arrival of the Spaniards. The growth of traditional writing in the Philippines was hindered due to the process of Hispanization. Hence, the remaining original script writing of the native Tagbanwas and Mangyans that prove we once had our own system of writing should be protected and preserved. Like in other Asian countries, it helps in understanding culture and tradition. That's it. Thank you for listening. We hope you picked up a thing or two.
Okay, thank you very much, group number 2. Now we will open the floor for questions and comments. Si Xavier. Xavier, sige, go ahead.
Hello, sir. Rinig po ba ako?
Yes, nadidinig.
Several questions lang po for the two reporting groups. First one sa first group po. Sabi po sa reading is that blueprints are not present before the building of these boats, right? Can someone confirm that?
Ano yan?
Blueprints are not present before building these boats.
Okay.
Uh,
Sige.
Yes. Can someone confirm that?
Actually, yes, especially na during that time, walang na-recover in those sites na mga parang writings or how was the boat made. So like everything that they did or all the archaeologists is parang theorizing at the same time yung mga resources na parang nandun, yung parang nag-serve sa kanila kung paano nagawa yun. There was also that, na-mention din kasi sa readings na parang anong tawag doon? There's like this initial experiment ata, may naglayag na mga in that way parang tinignan ngayon nila yung mga parang how did this boat work despite na hindi sila masyadong gumamit ng mga metals, at the same time purely wood yung mga ginamit nila. How did that work? So ayun, I think wala talaga. Nung nag-research din kasi ako, especially from the work of Laxina, I'm gonna send the link later. Yung doon is medyo pa rin yun, theorize pa rin yung mga ginagawa ng mga archaeologists ngayon. Tapos yung nagsaserve lang sa kanila na in order to study those things is yung mga available material, at the same time yung mga nahahanap ngayon na parts ng boats na yun.
I see. So meaning we still don't have enough data to just put the claim na wala pa tayong or wala ngang blueprints, right?
Oo, wala talaga. Wala.
I see. Okay, so second question is about do you have any data or idea about the condition of piracy in the Philippines back then?
Piracy. Okay.
Yes. Kasi you were discussing about I think
Piracy?
you told me about Moros, and Moros are actually
Okay.
Sige.
Okay. Sa piracy, there was walang na data doon, pero there's this Balangay, the recent one, the very big one. Parang there's this theory na ginagamit daw yun in order to fend the Butuan from Islamic parang, I don't know if they're pirates, pero yun ginagamit daw yun. Since hindi pa kasi nakikita, hindi pa dumarating mga European countries in our country. So I think you could consider that, or I don't know. I mean, the word itself, pirate, it could be anyone, so could be considered the Islams.
Yeah. Nice. Doon naman po sa second group, one question. Just like the first group, they presented us the problems faced by our anthropologists. What about in this kind of retrieval of scripts? What were the problems faced by the anthropologists? Yun lang po.
Okay, second group.
Hello, good evening, Xavier. One problem, as for example, dun sa Butuan paleograph, when the National Museum got hold of that paleograph, most of the archaeological contexts from where it was excavated from were already dug or have been gotten by the local diggers from that area. So coming from that, they had a hard time getting more information, or parang imbis na mas maaga nilang na-discover certain information about its dating, mas nahirapan sila. So I think that's one example of a problem. And until now, like for the Kalatagan pot, there's still varying interpretations of it.
Okay. Sige. Do you still want to add more? Xavier, are you contented with those answers, with those responses?
So far naman po, sir, okay naman po. Interesting topics.
Okay. So thank you for your small discussion about that. No? So bear in mind that we are now into the second millennium CE. No? The first millennium at saka second millennium CE. Yung the evidences for both building and use in the Philippines would be in the first millennium CE. No? Of course, still in the Metal Age. The earliest ones would still be in Mindanao, no? Pero hindi lang sa Butuan but also in Surigao. Meron mga evidences na sandali, isipin ko Surigao nga ba? Basta Northern Mindanao, no? Northern Mindanao. May evidences din sila doon, no? During the first millennium CE. No? And the thing that we would like to drive at, no, in this at this point is the idea of long distance trade being one of the drivers of maintaining social complexity in the Philippines. Diba na napag-usapan na namin during the past meetings that long distance trade was the means by which to acquire particular prestige goods, diba? Like blue and white porcelain and stoneware and some other products, no? That may not be present in the Philippines, no? in the locality, and therefore cannot be possessed by anybody, not even the elites who have limited capacity. Kaya importante yung long distance trade. No? So yun yung isang drivers natin ng social complexity. So ano pa? Ano yung mga pinag-uusapan natin dito? Aside from long distance trade, the other report also touches on the systems of writing. No? When we speak about systems of writing, we are into the cognitive aspect, no, of society. Halimbawa, how they conceptualize and then codify. No? Importante kasi yan. No? How they codify and siguro papunta na rin sila dun sa standardization, no, ng mga ideas na ito. Because even at that time, no, maybe even during the recent past, hindi naman lahat may system of writing. Merong there are only certain societies that have the tradition of a writing system. Yung mga iba oral lang. No? Halimbawa, when we look at India, so gagamit na naman ako ng example sa India. No? Before the Emperor Ashoka, halimbawa. No? Ashoka was one of the great emperors in India who have built an expansive empire in order to standardize and unify most of the Indian subcontinent. So, ganun yung importance ni Ashoka. No? But during at that time, no, he was also a significant personality because he was said to have started the system of writing that would codify most of the ideas in that period, especially the belief system. Halimbawa yung Buddhism. So siya yung nag-spread ng Buddhism throughout most of India. Because before him, the teachings of the Buddha were transmitted only orally. Okay, so if you are a teacher monk and you would be teaching your students or student monks, chances are orally yan, no? Hindi lang naman sa Buddhism, pati sa Hinduism, no? Yung the various strands of Hinduism, ganun din sila, no? Hindi pa sila masyado nun sa sulat-sulat nung second at nung first millennium BCE, no? That whole expanse of time, no? Although syempre nandun na yung mga Vedas, no? They were already written, but the training, no? The monks in training would have their lessons mostly, no, through oral transmission. Sinasabi lang ng monk, no, and they should remember that, no. Ganun kahirap nung time na yon. Halimbawa, ipapamemorize sa iyo lahat ng mga sutras, lahat ng mga hindi lang naman prayers, pati yung mga philosophical teachings, lahat yan, no? At this was so voluminous at kailangan mo memorizein yan, no? Such that pag nagkaroon kayo ng debates, you would you should have that in memory at when you argue with someone, no, during the debates, you can easily point to a particular sutra, no, or saying, no, from the Buddha halimbawa, para sabihin yun kaagad, no? So ganun ka automatic dapat yung arguments mo. Even until recently, halimbawa merong yung mga Hindu gurus na ganyan, no? Among the most important lineages of Hinduism. Ganyan din sila, no? Halimbawa, during the 19th century, yung mga monks in training, those who have later on became great Hindu teachers, no, after several decades, no. Yung training nila ganyan din, no. So for example, meron silang teacher at sasabihin ng teacher nila, I will teach you, but please do not bring notebooks or writing materials. You have to memorize all of my teachings, no? So kailangan mong isaulo yan and i-practice. Okay, para hindi mo makalimutan, no? We will be having questions and answers, pero kailangan sa ulado mo yung mga passages or yung slokas halimbawa, no, ng mga Hindu scriptures, ganyan, no? So meron silang tradition na ganon, no, which is so tedious, no. And then later on, pagdating ni Ashoka, no, yung emperor, yun na, unti-unti na nagkaroon ng system of writing. Why? Because he has to deliver the message, no, throughout his empire. So from his capital, halimbawa, no, close to the Himalayas, no, in northern India, no, up to the plains of the Ganges, up to central India, lahat yan, no, kailangan i-disseminate yung information. At para mangyari yon, kailangan ng symbols, no. So diyan mo makikita yung importance ng writing through symbols, no. You put into signs your ideas and the messages that you would like to convey. So kumalat yan, no? And why am I harping again at the Indian example? Kasi yung system of writing ng Pilipinas, no, yung mga alibata, yung mga syllabary natin, dyan din galing, no? Yung ugat niyan ay dyan din galing, no? So malaking influence ng Indian writing tradition. Hindi lang sa buong India, but up to where? Sri Lanka uses it, no? It also has been influenced by this writing tradition. The whole of Southeast Asia, no? So magtataka ka, no? Bakit hindi yung Chinese writing tradition ang pumunta sa Southeast Asia? Bakit yung Indian pa? Diba? That Chinese writing tradition has its own system, and it has spread throughout East Asia, no? Korea, no? Kung titignan mo kasi yung Korea, pwede rin naman maging Chinese, no? Or maging China. Pero no, meron silang sariling identity. Pero yung system of writing nila was also from the Chinese writing system. No? Also Japan, di ba? Yung Japan, wala namang writing system yan talaga na original. It was also copied from the Chinese. Okay, so all throughout East Asia, no, Northeast Asia, ganyan din yung nangyari. And then unti-unti silang unti-unti nilang in-influence yung South China. No? Pero magtataka ka, no? Most of our historians would be telling na malaking influence ng China, ganito, ganyan. But in the system of writing, sa India tayo, yung Indian tradition yung pumasok sa atin. So the whole of Southeast Asia, practically, from Myanmar, may marami ring cultures ang Myanmar, di ba? Take note of that. Hindi lang naman yung Burmese, pati yung mga Shan, yung Karen, ano pa yung mga alam nyo. No? Kaya nga sila nag-aaway-away doon. No? And they have built the country into a federal system of government, no? In order to accommodate this. No? Pero looks like hindi pa rin kontento yung mga tao. No? And it will never be kasi nga, in spite of federalism sa Myanmar, dinodominate pa rin nung mga ibang ethnic groups. So yung main ethnic groups, no, lowland ethnic groups. Okay. So Myanmar, Thailand, ganyan din. No? The system of writing of Thailand is also from the Indian tradition. Laos, Cambodia. Ano pa? So Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. The indigenous writing systems of Malaysia and all of Indonesia. No? Lalong-lalo na yung mga saan ba may writing system ng Indonesia? Sa Sumatra, sa Java, up to Bali. Meron din nakita sila sa Borneo, no? And also in Sulawesi, yung mga malalaking islands, no? At the western and the central parts of Indonesia. No? And of course, the whole of the Philippines. So lahat yan, isa lang yung ugat sa India. No? Hindi lang yun, pati sa Nepal and also Tibet. The Tibetan writing system is also or was also influenced by the Indian tradition. How? Because when Buddhism reached Tibet, nung time na yun, ano pa, no? When they accepted, no? When they embraced Buddhism, they loved it, no, yung mga Tibetans. First they argued about it, no. Some hated it, no. Ayaw nila, no? But later on they learned to love it, no. Kasi maganda yung naging epekto sa kanila from a warlike or warrior society, sabihin na nga natin na gano'n, kahit lahat naman warrior society. So war freak society, naging ano sila, no? Nagkaroon ng sistema yung lipunan nila, no? Because of this belief system. And so nagustuhan nila, and then what did they do? Sabi nila, nakakapagod naman mag-ano, no? Yung oral transmission lang, no? At saka ang dami-dami natin naiisip na mga ideas, no? Philosophical ideas, no? So we have to devise a writing system, no? So that writing system, they copied from they made it up, no, during the first millennium CE, the later parts, the later centuries of the first millennium CE, based on the Indian model. Okay? So yung mga tunog nila, well, partly medyo kakawig ng Sanskrit, no? Ay yung tunog ng mga ano nila, no? Yung abugida, no? Yung syllabary nila ay medyo may hawig, no? But not totally, no? Although may hawig dun sa Sanskrit, no? And so they continued to use it, no? Without modification until now. No, it was only modified once, but until now, no, yung the one in use up to this day, ganun pa rin, no? Hindi katulad ng mga European languages, no, or European alphabet, halimbawa. No, medyo nag-iiba-iba. From the Greek to the later on to the yung ginagamit sa continental Europe. No? Pati yung mga sounds sila nag-iiba. No? But in Tibet, hindi sila nag-iiba. Kaya madaling i-trace at gamitin pa rin. No? If you know Tibetan, madali siyang basahin. No? Yung mga scriptures, halimbawa na isinulat nila noon pa, 1,000 years ago, you can still read it. No? Kasi hindi masyadong malaki yung pagkakaiba ng pagsusulat nila. I think the same thing with the Chinese. No? So the Chinese writing system has been limited, no, only to those countries I have mentioned. Pero yung Indian was spread throughout the southeastern parts of Southeast Asia, of Asia. Okay, so ganyan ka importante kaya ito, no, nasabi ko na sa inyo kung paano nagsimula yung ating writing system. Ngayon, yung challenge ng mga paleographers natin, anthropologists, archaeologists, even historians, is to decipher the meaning of this system of writing. So tulad ng nabanggit ng ating mga reporters, may mga ilan, halimbawa yung Laguna Copper Plate, Takalatagan Pat, no? Kasi hindi na originally Sanskrit yung ginamit nila na language. So take note, iba yung writing system, iba din yung language. Diba? You can use a writing system for different languages. Halimbawa tayo, we use the Roman alphabet, diba? For writing in English, for expressing our ideas in English, or conveying messages in English, and also in Tagalog, and also in Ilocano, in Pangasinense, Kapampangan, and so on. Ganon din sa Indonesia. No? So noong unang panahon, ganon din. They may be using the Devanagari script of India, no? Because the Devanagari script until now is the one that they use in writing Hindi, no, one of the official languages of India. And also before and even now, Sanskrit, no, they are also writing this in Devanagari. Okay? And then when Devanagari was introduced into Southeast Asia, may nagkaroon ng pagkakaiba yan. No? So yung mga iba gumamit pa rin, pero yung mga iba they chose not to. No? They use their own writing, the writing system that they have been traditionally using. Pero they are expressing Sanskrit thoughts. Okay, or Sanskrit philosophy. Okay, so pwedeng ganyan tulad nung Laguna Copper Plate, di ba? Yung ginamit nila ay ano 'yon? Kawi script, no? Their traditional script, which is also based from the influence of India, used to express Old Malay or Old Malay. Okay, kasi yun yung lingua franca ng malaking bahagi ng Southeast Asia noon. Pagdating sa Pilipinas, medyo nag-iba na naman, no? and so on. Okay, so sige, anong oras ba? 7:04, no? So yun yung about blueprints, ano? So kung titignan natin, they can do away with blueprints, pero there may be some point in time na they were using blueprints. So halimbawa, in order to build like yung mga structures, buildings, boats, halimbawa. But we still do not have research on that, no, kung kailan halimbawa nangyari yun. Pero kasi those people who have been practicing or who have been learning without writing, sanay na sila diyan, di ba? Halimbawa, may mga karpintero tayo na they can build something out of memory. Sabihin mo lang, no? Na ganito, ganyan, ganyan. No? Alam na nila yon. Even the, ano ba yun, yung mga sastre, di ba? Napansin nyo yun when you want to tailor fit your dress, halimbawa, yung mga bestida or kung ano yan. Or yung maong na mahaba, papunta doon sa patahian, sabihin nyo lang, kailangan ko ganito yung sukat, ganito, ganyan, tutupiin lang nila na ganyan. Wala na yung mga isusulat-sulat pa. No? Although marami na rin nagsusulat, no? Pero yung mga iba, minsan ganyan, manang or auntie, gusto ko ganito, ganyan, ganyan. Gupitan nyo ng ganyan, yung ganitong sukat, ganito lang yung bewang ko, and so on. Alam na nila yon. Okay, gagawin na nila, puputulan na nila. Para pag kinuha nyo, okay na. Susuot nyo na lang. Okay, so ganun yung practice, no, ng marami sa atin. But before I continue talking again, let's call on Kawu.
So good evening, sir.
Afternoon.
Sir, for the first group, sir, I have a question for the first group. But before I do so, I would like to commend their efforts for including the report in media coverage of the actual excavation in Binanao, and also for including the report a list of trivia about the Panday. So my question now is, are there elements from Balangay that are retained and are still employed by boat builders? Like, are there still elements retained?
Okay, so the reporters on the Balangay, are there elements, no? Elements of halimbawa technology yan, that have been used, no, by our present boat builders? Tama ba? Sige. FOD?
Yes, sir. Elements like the way of construction, the materials used, and the designs of the boat, things like that.
Okay, thank you. So ayun, I think I would say na sa design, na-retain pa rin yung design as of now, which is very evident in the boat scene in Mindanao. So ayun, there are maybe some things are still used, pero yun lang medyo na modified with the present resources na yung may mga different resources na ngayon na mas pinadaling makagawa. So ayun, I think the idea is still alive today, especially na meron na yung mga tinatawag nila ngayon sa Butuan na Balangay Festival, wherein there's this boat making activities. So ayun, I think that can be considered as an element, the design itself, tapos how it functions. Pero as the entirety of the entirety of how the Balangay was made, I think it's modified now. Medyo na modify ngayon with the presence of mga gamit ngayon na mas pinadali na gumawa ng mga bagay-bagay.
Okay. Okay, so we have also to look at the present boat building practice, di ba? Halimbawa, if you have the chance to travel between islands in the Philippines, mapapansin nyo na yung bangka na ginagamit natin, no, siguro yung marami sa atin they only take for granted, no, when you see boats, halimbawa yung mga baroto, yung mga yung mga lancha, no, pero ito yung mga designs na specific, no, para sa atin, no, para sa Pilipinas. Kasi when you look at the boats of other countries, halimbawa, no, like Indonesia, iba naman yung nila, no? Iba yung itsura ng mga bangka, no? Yung mga iba, halimbawa, they are not fond of putting yung katig outrigger, diba? Halimbawa, yung mga North American at saka European boats, hindi naman sila naglalagay talaga ng mga ganyan. sa Pilipinas natin nakikita. And still, halimbawa, meron din mga iba na sa isang side lang nilalagyan ng kati. Ganyan. Yung sa atin, mostly on both sides sila lagyan. Yung design din ng boat ay may pagkakaiba din, no, from the other boat building traditions, especially in the other world regions. Okay, so these were, well, we can suppose, no, that this has been the contribution of ancient boat building practices, no, kasama na diyan yung nasa Butuan. Okay? Sige, si Micaela. Micaela?
Yes, sir. Before po I say my comment, may correction po kami from the report. The Laguna copper plate has a Saka date of 822 po, which corresponds to 900 AD. Pero yung na-mention po namin a while ago was Saka date of 900. Yun lang naman.
Okay.
Tapos for my comment naman po, I don't really have questions po kasi just a comment. From what I know po, Filipinos were Austronesians. I mean, early Filipinos were Austronesians and they are known to be
Even today, we are
seafarers.
Austronesians.
Yes po. I'm sorry.
We are classified, or our the technique, mas tama siguro sabihin na our languages are classified as Austronesian.
Yes po. Apologies po. And I think po it's why they were very meticulous in making the balangay. I also noticed po that much like in prehistoric writing, both topics are kind of centralized to trading and how it shaped the culture of our country pre-Spanish era. Yun lang naman. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So the reporters, would you like to comment on that? Kawo, you are raising your hand again?
Yes, sir. I have questions, sir, for the second group too.
Okay.
So, sir, I have two questions for them. First one, sir. Are there prehistoric writings that were done differently? I mean, were there prehistoric writings written from bottom to top, or from right to left? And also for my second question, sir, are the second group of reporters for or against the introduction of the Baybayin writing in the academia under the pretext of immortalizing the Filipino pre-colonial identity?
Okay. So yung ancient writing pa rin, no? The group on ancient writing. Okay, sige. Sige, sige.
Yes. Tanong ko, can you repeat your first question? I'm sorry. Kau.
Hello, Mark. So, yung unang tanong ko, may mga prehistoric writings ba sa Pilipinas na isinulat na sa paraan na iba sa current style of writing? Kasi di ba sa atin ay from left to right? Are there prehistoric writings written from right to left or from bottom to top? Ganun.
There were, from the reading and sa further research, an essay by Sir Deviana. Scholars actually debate about it. Parang hindi pa definite na merong way of write. I mean, hindi siya naging, at the time, hindi siya parang definite na how do you say it, how the ancient scripts were written. Pero for example sa Laguna copper plate, I think yung pagsulat doon, it started from left to right and they were able to transliterate the lines, the 10 lines that way. But there are debates na they aren't sure if it's from left to right, top to bottom. Kasi, for example, from the Kalatagan pot,
Kabilog yun, di ba? Yung
Yes,
kalatagan.
sir. Pabilog po
Hindi
kasi.
mo alam kung
So,
clockwise or
hindi sila
counterclockwise
sure
ang
kung
side.
paano po ano yun. So, there isn't any definite answer and they do debate about it still. Parang ganun.
Okay.
Yun lang naman.
So this is,
To give
yes.
siguro kawo po a more specific example po. Halimbawa, for the two groups that have retained their traditional writing, for the Mangyans na lang po, the Hanunuo scripts po, traditionally, it's written with the point of a knife po on a bamboo in vertical columns from bottom to top and left to right. So parehas po. Though papers say that they still usually read from left to right in horizontal lines. So parang they do both, right? From bottom to top and left to right po.
Okay. Because this is an important and interesting issue. No? Kasi minsan hindi natin napapansin because most of us, many cultures seem to be practicing reading from left to right. Pero may mga iba halimbawa from top to bottom, like the Chinese. So part of their writing tradition would be to write halimbawa from top to bottom. Sa Indian, I think for the scripts that I have been seeing, no, dun lang naman sa mga textbook. No? Ganun pa rin, no, from left to right. No? Ganun yung style nila. Although ang isa pang issue ay ano yung pagkakaputol-putol ng mga syllables at saka saan nag-i-stop yung saysay halimbawa ng isang sentence or even phrase. Ganun yung problema halimbawa ng mga scholars. Kasi for the Roman alphabet and halimbawa for English, madali yun kasi meron tayong mga punctuation marks. And the words that we write would be evenly spaced, no? Halimbawa pag we are writing two words, there is a space in between, there is a gap in between. Whereas dun sa mga ibang writing systems like Tibetan and Sanskrit, no? Minamarkahan nila yung bawat syllable ng yung sort of punctuation mark para alam nila, no, na isang syllable yon. Actually hindi pala, no? Hindi. Sa Sanskrit hindi nila minamarkahan pero makikita mo pala, no? Makikita mo pala na isang syllable yon. So halimbawa merong isang sentence and the way they write their sentence would be tuloy-tuloy, no, continuous. Pero malalaman mo dun sa symbols yung mga syllables. Pero at the end of a sentence, halimbawa verse, no, in verse form nilalagyan nila ng stop line at the end, no, para doon natatapos yung verse, no? Because most of the time this would be in verse form, yung tinatawag halimbawa na shloka. Okay, ganyan din sa Tibetan, yung mga tawag nito. Kalimutan ko na yung tawag nila. Basta verse din, no? Pero lalagyan nila ng ganyan. No? Pag buong ano na yan, halimbawa they have the whole thing has to end, lalagyan nila ng dalawang line naman. Indicating that the whole thing is has ended. Okay, doon sa atin medyo malabo yung mga ano natin, syllabary natin. For one, medyo in debate pa rin kung paano natin halimbawa babasahin yung mga a, e, i, o, u or yung ma, me, ni, mo, mu, ganyan. No? May konting problema doon sa doon sa pag-indicate through the symbols. Okay. Sige, natawag ko na lahat. Okay, do you have any other thing to add? Sandali, yung chat message pala, no? May mga nagsusulat sa chat message. Okay, from Aldo's, rituals could also in themselves be the blueprints in both in building boats. Yes, it could also be that way. So minsan naka-encode dun sa rituals. It is possible. Okay. Thanks.
Sir, Kawu has a second question po a while
Okay,
ago.
sige. Ask the
So,
question.
It's about if
Sige, go ahead.
we agree that baybayin should be learned.
Ayaw nga pala, yes, about the baybayin. Sige.
However, we recognize po na it's a subjective question, but we do think that it is important to learn our culture that's na sa atin po talaga. And ang alam ko po kasi ngayon may modified version na rin po yung baybayin. Kasi dati po 'di ba other vowels are interchanged po. Let's say E and I can be interchanged, O and U could be interchanged, parang ganun. Ngayon po yata meron na rin po silang mas specific na way of writing baybayin.
Okay, so it is still a contentious issue, no? Halimbawa, may mga iba na pag tinitignan nyo yung ibang bansa, ganyan din eh. In China, there is not much of a problem. Although during since communism started in China, I don't know if you are familiar, no, with the things happening in China, pero they have modified, no, their writing system, no. Ganun pa rin naman, no. Yes, during the Cultural Revolution, kasi di ba mahirap magsulat ng script nila, no? And so the Mao administration, so Mao Zedong administration, thought of simplifying this. Simplifying the way it is written. So gumawa sila ng listahan ng mga pagbabago nito, no? So for example, the symbol for study dapat ganito na. So hindi na ganun ka masyadong masalimuot, no? Simplify the writing or the sign, no? Ganyan na, no? So for student, ganito na. And so on. Ganon yung ginawa nila, no? It is not much of a problem kasi sa China, pag sinabi ng Beijing na sumunod kayo, susunod sila. But in India, that is not the story. Sa India, halimbawa, may away pa rin yung mga iba't ibang regions niyan. No? Although dahil siguro mas malakas yung northern part ng India, so yung writing system nila yung nangibabaw halimbawa, and yung Sanskrit din ang nangibabaw para gamitin in order to have it as well, they are attempting, I think they have succeeded, no, in making it one of the official languages of India. No? Kasi the North has its own writing system na yun yung kilala din natin, no? Devanagari and then the scriptural language Sanskrit. Pero yung southern part meron din sarili, which is Tamil, no? And Tamil has also its own writing system. Okay, kaya pagdating sa baybayin yon, no? Ang Pilipino ganyan din, no? Maraming mga arguments. Kaya hindi din natin maiwasan. Tulad halimbawa ng Tagalog, which became the national language when in fact it is only one of the languages, the most used languages in the Philippines. In fact, Cebuano is used by more people, no, than Tagalog, no? If you think of it, no? Visayas in Mindanao, no? Pag ginamit mo yung Cebuano, as differentiated from Ilonggo, no? Pag ginamit mo yung Cebuano, magkakaintindihan kayo sa Visayas at Mindanao. At of course, Tagalog, na dahil nandun nga yung the action, no, in history, no? The ones who started the revolution. Well, partly kasi sa Negros at sa ibang parts ng Pilipinas, meron din namang revolution na nangyayari. Pero mas nakilala kasi nangyayari sa Manila. Okay, kaya ganon, no? Nung pagdating ni Quezon, sabi niya, sige, gawin nating national language na lang ang Tagalog, no? Pero other scholars would say na Filipino na lang. Wag natin tawagin na Tagalog talaga. Although when you look at it, it is heavily based on Tagalog. And predominantly Tagalog na ginawa mo lang isang dialect na. Isang dialect ng Tagalog. Okay. Chat message again before we end. I think tignan ko muna. Okay. So from Xavier, I think another problem is the diversity of languages we have. Unlike China, it's relatively easier to have language revolution than in the Philippines. Yes, it is true. No? Although in China, diverse din yung language nila. But the standardization, no, has been happening all along since many, many centuries ago. So at present, hindi na sila masyado nahirapan because it was standardized na early on. Early on. Okay? So yung mga binabasa nyo halimbawa na Tang Dynasty, yung mga dynasties in China, no? They have this habit of standardization, standardizing everything in the territories that they conquer. At malalaki yung territories na nakukonquer nila. Kaya yun yung nangyari sa China. Okay. Ano pa yung mga tanong nyo? Yung kanina, no? About the syllabus. Pag tinignan natin yung syllabus, merong point. Sige, Nicole, go ahead.
Sir, nakalagay po sa syllabus 3 to 5 pages po. Mag-i-stay na lang po ba doon?
Yung ano?
Yung dun po kasi sa syllabus po na nakalagay po 3 to 5 pages po. Bali po yung
sa
maximum
special...
po is 5. Opo. Kasi sir, sabi niyo po kanina 5 tapos hanggang 7. Pwede po bang 3 to 5 na lang?
3 to 5 ba yung nailagay ko? Tama ba?
Opo, sir. Opo, sir.
3 to 5. O, sige, kung nailagay ko na 3 to 5, okay, so nag-agree kayo lahat, ano? Mukhang ano, no? May nailagay ako dyan na nakalimutan ko. Sige, kung gano'n na nga nailagay ko, sige, 3 to 5 na lang nga. Okay, single space. Pero yung sinabi ko sa inyo, no, you choose a topic, pero hindi lang halimbawa, kunwari Balangay Boat. Tapos sinulat nyo lang about the Balangay Boat. Mag-identify kayo ng issue about the Balangay Boat. At yun yung i-discuss nyo. Putting in your opinions, no? At yung basis nyo on saying that or elaborate nyo. Chat message. Remind ko lang, sabi nyo po, i-discuss nyo rin po yung deadline ng special problem. Okay, yung deadline ng special problem, kaya nyo ba sa ngayong December? Yung mga kaya ngayong December, you can submit it. But if not, sige, mag-schedule na lang tayo, no? January. Kasi yung final exam nyo naman nasa January pa. So, I will allow you to submit it sometime in January. Mag-set na lang tayo ng deadline doon. But for those who can submit it earlier, please do so. Okay? Ano pa yung binanggit natin? Time check, it is 7:29. Yung assignment, no, naisip ko, wala doon, di ba nakita nyo yung syllabus natin, walang nakalagay na assignment as basis for grade. Gagawin na lang natin bonus points yun. No? It would be 5% bonus points. No? In addition to the points that you would get in your final exam. No? So your percentage in the final exam, idadagdag na lang natin doon yung percentage nyo sa assignment. Okay? Halimbawa, pag sinabi natin na 5% yung assignment, no? 5% pag na-perfect nyo yung assignment. Otherwise, it would be less, no? Depende dun sa makukuha nyo. At yun yung idadagdag natin dun sa final exam. Okay? Okay, so ganun ang gagawin natin. Any more questions?
Sir, may tanong po ako sa final exam.
Yes.
Magiging objective type po ba or essay type yung exam natin? Tapos yung coverage po ba is from the very start or may limitation
Yes,
po
from
kayo
the
dito?
yes, from the very start. Kaya nyo naman yun. Kaya nyo naman yun. Tapos kung essay, pag-iisipan ko pa. Pwedeng hindi kasi essay yun. No? Pwedeng ibang type ng exam. No? Kung objective naman, parang kasi parang iba yung makukuha mo, no? Iba yung ina-assess mo pag objective eh. Dapat siyempre kailangan mo ring mag-isip, no? Yung mga kayo nasasagot ng exam, you have to think, no? Hindi lang maghahanap kayo ng term and then you will write it down. Okay, so essay, parang ayoko mag-essay lalong-lalo na pag mahaba yung essay, no? Because the special problem would be, we would take care of that. Okay? Kaya hindi na siguro essay. Okay? Sige, ano pa? Time check, it's 7:32. No? So we will meet again on Thursday, on Tuesday. Pero yung reporting ng susunod na group, no, yung last group would be on December 16. Okay, so you would have 2 weeks to prepare. I have already posted the article in the VLE, so you can take a look at that. No? So for the next report, we'll be concentrating on colonial towns around Lake Taal in Batangas. No? Kasi may mga archaeological work na tayo na nagawa doon. So we will review that. Okay? Okay? Sige, wala na kayong gustong itanong. We have overshoot our time. It's 7:33. Okay, so with that, thank you very much for attending this session.
Thank you, sir.
Yes?
Thank
Sige.
you po, sir.
Wala na? Okay. Sige. Thank you very much. Mag-iingat kayo palagi. Happy weekend.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.